and I was there a bit like, okay, twiddling my thumbs, what do I do?
Welcome to Graduate Compass, the podcast for graduates who haven't quite figured out what their next step is going to be.
Sophie, you're very welcome to Graduate Compass. Thank you so much for joining us. As a start and a top and tail, for want of a better phrase, can you let us know what you went to study originally and what you're doing now in your career?
So I went to Leeds Trinity University to study teacher training, and specifically primary education, early years. So you could do the later years, which is more like Key Stage 2, but I decided to do Key Stage 1 because I personally really loved that age group, and all throughout high school or secondary school, I did health and social care and I did childcare, and they were the two subjects besides product design, which is another kind of area of mine that I really enjoy, that really kind of clung to me. And I was just a bit like, I really like this. I really like being with children. I love educating them, and I find it that you can be quite creative in that industry as well, because you can create the resources, you can plan the lessons. They obviously have to be catered to the individual children. So I thought teaching would be the perfect outlet for that kind of creativity. And so when I did the teacher training, if I'm honest, I found it super difficult. And I originally wasn't even going to go to university. I wanted to be an au pair. And so it was only really my dad who said, you should probably go to university because I think you'd be really good at it. But all through secondary school, I was in quite a lot of the lower sets for kind of almost everything. And then when I got to A levels, something kind of clicked, and I was a bit like, I feel like I can do well here. So I really need to knuckle down and start revising and put my all into it and believe in myself, because so far nobody had really said to me, you could be good at something. So when I found childcare and health and social care, and I found that I was really good at it, I was like, I need to do this and let's go to university. Although, as I say, it was a very hard 3 years, and because I'm very, hardworking, but equally a perfectionist, I probably did too much. And so I never really had like the university experience. I couldn't go out with my friends. I didn't really socialise. All I did was work and read. So when I finished, I graduated with a first, and I was really proud of myself for achieving a first. But I can't say that I really enjoyed my experience, but I think that was me personally. I think teaching as a job is extremely difficult. And, you know, this past year, it's for people who are actually working in a school. You can see that it's an extremely difficult job. And I think when I finished the degree, I realised teaching in its usual instance, where you're in a classroom in front of 30 kids, you know, full time, it wasn't to my personal taste. So I knew that I needed to get my QTS, so you need to get your qualified teacher status, and you have to do like your first year as a teacher, and then you become an NQT, so a newly qualified teacher, and then you do another year and you become an RQT, which is a recently qualified teacher, and then you're officially like a teacher. So I knew in the back of my mind I have to do my NQT year. I have to do it, because otherwise these 3 years have been pointless. I've put myself through all this hard work and it's been arduous, and for what? I'm not going to have anything to show from it. And I was like, I need to feel more confident in my ability and my understanding of teaching as a job, as an understanding of children. So I went and did a master's at Durham in education, and thoroughly enjoyed that. And I was actually able to experience university life as well. And even though I did put, you know, a lot of work into it, because I lived with my boyfriend in Durham and I was away from home, and it was just a really nice experience, I thoroughly enjoyed it and came away from it thinking, yeah, teaching is for me. So now I am working at Leeds Trinity University, so I'm back there now, working as a knowledge exchange coordinator, which basically relates to knowledge exchange as a thing kind of says what it is on the tin. It's an exchange of knowledge between an academic institution and a non-academic organisation, or a person, for example. So it would be if our university, somebody from the English department, were wanting to put on creative writing for, let's say, a local elderly group, that would be knowledge exchange. And it doesn't necessarily have to generate an income, but if it does generate an income, then it's obviously much better for the university because you're getting something back from it, as well as having public engagement, as well as increasing awareness of the university, getting your academics out there and their names known, etc. So I'm kind of the coordinator of that within the university. And then equally, I also on the side of that have my own tutoring business, and I currently have 8 students, and it's very full on, especially now given everything. But I never would have thought, if you'd asked me a year ago when I was looking for jobs, by the way, this time next year you'll have been working at Leeds Trinity for nearly a year in an area that you've never heard of before, and you're also running a business, I probably would have laughed and fallen off my chair.
So there's a couple of things I want to kind of touch upon, which you've mentioned. First of all, I thought it was really interesting when you said that you never realised, I may be slightly paraphrasing you, that that no one had ever said to you that you were good at something. And then when you kind of have that self-realization of your own kind of confidence that you could achieve something, it's actually not something that's come up very often in the podcast. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to explore that for a second, because I think it's such a great way of phrasing it, that it's such an interesting way of phrasing it. So what did it, when you had that kind of self-realization, what was it like?
I mean, I think I can't tell you at what exact point I had this realization, if you want to call it that, but I just remember when I went through my GCSEs, and obviously at GCSE you can pick the subjects that you want to do, and we had to do languages because it was a language college, and I chose product design, health and social care, and childcare, and the childcare was a BTEC, and BTECs are looked upon as very limiting, that they're not looked at the same as a normal GCSE. So because I'd chosen a BTEC, quite a lot of people that I knew would say to me, "Oh, you're doing a BTEC, it doesn't even mean anything." So already for the actual topic, childcare, people were like, yeah, anybody that does childcare is rubbish and it's not proper. So I was a bit like, oh, maybe I have chosen the wrong thing. But then when I started studying it just kind of sang to me, and I just really found, because you learn a lot from the biology of a child, to how a child develops, to how to implement a safe environment for a child, how to encourage their self-esteem and their confidence. And that's 100% one thing that as a tutor I really try to do, because I had such a lack of self-confidence, and still do to some extent. I try and evoke that confidence in my students, so they always say, "Oh, I can't do it, I can't do it." And I have a little poster in my little office outside that says, "I'm sorry, but can't is not used in this room." And I always say to them, "I'm sorry, but no, I don't want to hear that word. You only can't do it because you've not tried it yet, And I think that's what I had to say to myself. Yes, you might be afraid of going to university, and yes, you might be afraid of failing, but you don't know unless you try. And I think that was the same for my masters. If my boyfriend hadn't have said to me, "You can 100% do a masters, you need to have confidence in yourself, you've got to first do it," I don't think I would have pushed myself to do it. And so I think for me, I am still very much an anxious person, in the fact that I'm always wanting to do my best. I'm a perfectionist, as I've already said, and I'm conscious that I'm not doing enough, but I'm probably doing enough and a little bit more. But I think that kind of drive and that motivation is also what's got me where I am, and it's got me 2 first degrees, and it's got me in a position where, I've got my own business and I'm in a good job. So even though it started off that I wasn't really believed in, I feel like I'm the one that now needs to truly believe in myself, because everybody around me really does, because I've kind of proved myself. Not that I have anything to prove, but if you know what I mean.
I do, and I'm really grateful for you for expanding on it, because it's something that is part and parcel of the whole career development journey. That kind of self-belief and realizing that you can achieve something, and realizing that you can accomplish what you set out to accomplish, and it's a huge thing. So I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of give us a bit of an insight into that, and I hope that'll be useful to someone who's listening. And I'm curious to talk about, to kind of go back on something else you mentioned a few minutes ago, because you were talking about, like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it very much sounded like you were, as you were going through this whole process, that you were kind of having this realization that teaching in the let's call it the traditional form of teaching was not for you. That there was, and I thought it was really interesting that you talked about wanting to be an au pair as well, because it kind of, there's overlaps in kind of skills and energies there, and kind of in the one-to-one tutoring. So when did you start really, I suppose, accepting that you weren't going to go down the let's call it the traditional teaching route, and you were going to go into your own business? When did that become a clear idea for you?
Well, in regards to not wanting to teach in the traditional sense, I'd probably say after my first year of university, and that's quite a stark comment to make because I still had 2 years to go. But my mum kind of said to me, if you look at it this way, because teaching is such a vocational course, even though you might not go straight into teaching in the traditional sense, there'll be so many different routes that it opens up for you. And obviously, looking at where I am right now, it's evident because I am working in primary education. It's just obviously on a one-to-one basis, and I am working in tertiary education. So again, if you'd said to me when I was in my first year of university, these are the options that you can do, I think I would have felt a lot more confident in myself. I think I kind of boxed myself in and thought, this leads to teaching in a classroom in front of 30 children, and there's no other job for you. This is all you can do. And that's 100% not true. And so I think it was probably, the second placement was quite difficult. And then the last placement was even more difficult because obviously it ramps up every year, but more in a sense of me being able to cope with the responsibility and the pressures. And it's not necessarily from the school, because the schools that I worked in were fantastic and the staff were so supportive, and the children were lovely. Every day was a new day, in the sense of I actually failed my driving test and had to go into school on the same day. And one of my students said to me, as he was leaving the classroom, "Have a nice sleep. You look like you need one." And he was 6. So I was like, wow, he can really tell that I'm not feeling great today. But that's what I loved about it. I knew I loved the children. I knew I loved the job. It was the pressures of, I want to say, the politics behind it, and the fact that there's so much pressure to just get all these tick boxes done. And that's how it felt for me anyway. And so I just couldn't handle the responsibility. And also the fact that I couldn't be as creative as I wanted to be, because there were a lot of things that the actual teacher of the class said, we need this, this, this and this done. And I was a bit like, but I want to do this, this and this. And she was like, no, you can't. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was a bit like, I really want a job that is teaching, but is more controlled by me, and I can be more creative and tailor it to the individual child, rather than having to give like a blanket lesson where some children are perhaps missed and not given as much attention and detail as they might need. And in regards to my business, it was when I came back from traveling, which I think was 2018. It was after Durham. Yeah, after Durham we went traveling, me and my boyfriend. And I came home and I had the summer to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And I was like, okay, I want to be a tutor. So I signed up to a website and I set up my little profile. But then it said, sorry, it costs however much to get your name actually visible to people. So I was like, I'm going to leave it. I'll just forget about it. Never mind. And maybe 2 or 3 months later, after months of searching for like normal jobs in the sense of a 9-to-5 job, I had a random email saying, "Hi, please could you tutor my child?" And so I was confused as to where they got my email from, firstly, because I'd forgotten that I'd signed up to this website. And then I was like, oh gosh, yeah, I remember I signed up. And so I got in contact with her, and I still have that tutee now. And it's really nice to see how much she's blossomed and how much she's changed. And so I've had her, now since September 2019, I think it was. And from then on, I thought, yeah, actually, this is something that I want to do. I want to get my name out there. I want this to be an actual business. And so I kind of created a poster and posted it on all of the Facebook community pages and on LinkedIn, etc. And it suddenly just took off, and loads of people were sharing it, which was really lovely. And it kind of got it out there. And then at the same time, I was like, I can't have this as my full-time job because it just doesn't generate enough income. So I need to find a job that fits in perfectly with my tutoring. And obviously, because tutoring, usually it's after about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because that's when primary schools finish. I was like, I need a job that's in the morning. So I was searching for ages to find a part-time job in an education kind of industry. And then this Leeds Trinity job just popped up, which is 9 till 12:30 every day in an area that I love. Oh, well, now I love it. At the time, I didn't know what it is, but, I love it now. But at a place that I love, that I did my degree. And it was honestly like someone had said, we'll give her a break. Let's just make it work for her. Tick, tick, tick. It all fits together. Done.
There's so many. I love that. It's a great story. And I think it does show us what can happen, if you put in the work and you really try, and if you get a bit of luck along the way, it makes such a difference. And I'm delighted to hear that. I want to rewind back to something you said at the start of that, which I thought was really interesting, because you made 2 points. You said that that the school teaching wasn't kind of creative enough, which I totally understand, I totally get that. But you said, and I'm going to quote you here, you said, I couldn't handle the responsibility. But then in my head, the second you said that, and I went, I didn't get a chance to say, because I didn't want to interrupt you, but in my head I'm saying, so then you went off and set up your own business and have a tutoring company where you're the only tutor. I mean, you probably couldn't go for more responsibility if you tried in a kind of an educational sense, when at least in the school, you've got the support of the school.
That's true. I guess, I think it's probably because more the responsibility, because there's more children as well. So you have a class of 30, whereas obviously I only have 8 tutees. So because there's less children, I can really devote my time and effort and creative juices, if that's what you want to call it, to each individual child. So I probably spend, maybe two to 3 hours a week planning for each child. But because I love it so much, I don't really see it as a job. And I think because it's only, an hour for each child, again, it doesn't seem too heavy. Whereas when I was in the classroom, because it was 9 till 3:30, but then you've got all of the planning for the next day, you've got the marking of the books, the classroom set up, etc., and there was 30 of them, let's say, it just made it seem way too heavy for me. And because you're in a school that has a certain, obviously they have all of their own, what's the word, values, that kind of thing. So they have their own values and they have their own practices and they have their own ways of teaching. And if you don't kind of agree with that, or you don't fit in with everybody else, again, not that I didn't necessarily, but I did feel that a couple of the schools that I've worked in have been quite authoritarian, and I'm kind of a little bit more focused on, I like play, I like experiential learning, I like them being creative. So, I look online for ways of teaching maths in a creative way so that they don't actually know that they're doing maths, if you see what I mean. And obviously I've learned all of this from Leeds Trinity, and that's why I did love the degree. I don't want people listening to think that I hated the degree, because I didn't. The degree itself and the university was fantastic. It was just the job for me personally was just too much to handle, really.
And in fairness, I think a lot of people who will be listening who know anything about particularly the schooling system in England will be familiar that it is a strained system in the sense that I think a lot of teachers find that they have issues with certain things, how they're run. I'm not going to criticize the system at all because I don't work in it, but I do know that is a kind of feedback that a lot of people who work in the English school system have said. So I don't think you're alone. I think that people will understand that. It's interesting though. I am fascinated by the fact that a tutor who's running her own business would get a job as a knowledge exchange coordinator, because there's some kind of poetry in that. And you've already kind of touched a little bit about what that job is and explained it, gave us a bit of an introduction to it. But what's your kind of day-to-day like in a job like that?
So as you'll know yourself, in a higher education institution, you have the TEF and the REF, and obviously their Research Excellence Framework and Teaching Excellence Framework. And this year, Research England have brought out the KEF, which is the Knowledge Exchange Framework. And knowledge exchange is something that's existed within higher education for a long time, but it's kind of come under a number of terms. So people might have heard of it as knowledge transfer, innovation. There's so many different terms. So I think there's quite a lot of contention around what knowledge exchange actually is. And quite a lot of the time, people don't realise that they're actually doing it. So you'll say, oh, by the way, have you done anything recently that is knowledge exchange? And they'll say, no, I've not even heard of it. And you'll say, well, what have you been up to? And they'll be like, oh, well, I've done this publication and I've set up this working group with the local community and I've done this, this and this. And you're like, well, all of those are knowledge exchange. So I think Leeds Trinity are aiming to get knowledge exchange as kind of like a little hub, and we're wanting to increase our practices with knowledge exchange. Hopefully get our name out there, create partnerships and have loads of public engagement. And it's harder for a smaller institution like Leeds Trinity to do something like that, because you obviously don't have a huge number of employees and you don't have the capacity, I guess, to do the stuff that like University of Manchester do, or University of Leeds even. But it is great because you can create those relationships with other institutions. And me personally, because I only started last February, it's been a case of trying to get to know a number of people at the university. I did like an audit to see what a few people have done throughout the university to get an idea of what areas of knowledge exchange we are strong in. So public engagement is definitely one of our strengths, but there's also IP, and there's a number of different areas that classes as knowledge exchange. And for the KEF, you have to provide 3 different statements: public engagement one, a local growth and regeneration one, and then a general institutional statement to kind of set the scene for your institution. And so I think it's going to be a tri-annual thing, but Research England, because it's the first stage, it's all very unsure at the moment. So we're still waiting to hear the results of our KEF, and I'm really excited to hear how we've done. I think it'll be interesting to see.
Well, good luck. I hope it goes well.
Yeah.
And I'm curious. Like, I don't usually get to this actually get asked this question too often in the podcast, but I'm curious to know what you hope to do kind of in the future of it, because it sounds like you're going to have this kind of dual career that is fascinating in both sense, because you've got the knowledge exchange, which is super interesting, and I appreciate. I'm a total higher education geek, so I'm like on your every word, going yeah, I'm totally following this, and but also from the tutoring and having your own business. And do you see a point where are you hoping that you can kind of travel those roads as long as possible, or would you want to switch and be full-time in one and full-time in another, or just, I mean, I'm not going to make you going to commit to anything right here and now. I'm just wondering what you're thinking and what you'd hope to do in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think because of how it's all fallen, I've been, super lucky and fortuitous, but realistically, it's probably not something that I can continue doing for a number of years, just because tutoring is I have to be so flexible, because one week I might, especially during COVID, there's been many times where I've had calls saying, I'm sorry, we can't come this week, or I'm on furlough, so I can't afford it. And it's been some weeks where, like this week, for example, I'm working Monday to Friday, 2 hours of tutoring every day, and then I'm also doing 3 hours on a Sunday. So whereas then it can go to another week where I only have Wednesday afternoon 1 hour. So it definitely couldn't be my main job, because it just doesn't generate enough income to live on, basically. And I think for Trinity, because I found knowledge exchange, or I should better say it found me, I would love to continue to work in it, because it's an area that I really enjoy, and I think it's really interesting, and because it's up and coming as well, and it's getting out there, people are getting more aware of what knowledge exchange is, and it's definitely not something that's going to vanish overnight. It's probably going to be there for a long time. So I quite like the fact that I've come at it right at the beginning when things have started to kick off, and I'd really like to see it through. So who knows really what's going to happen. I'm excited to see as well where I'm going to be in a year's time. Who knows?
Maybe come back to us at a later stage and give us an update, because it is really interesting, because you've got these two really interesting careers that are kind of going parallel, and that are so different and so overlapping at the same time. So yeah, I'm very interested to see what happens with it. We're coming to the end of the chat, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's been very different, very interesting to see how things have went and how you've got on. And I'm very curious to know what advice you have for those who are listening, who aren't sure about what they're going to do, who have worries and concerns about the courses they're doing or where they're going to lead, and all those kind of things that go along with it. Where do you start in the advice that you have to give?
Well, from someone who, as I've already said, is quite an anxious person, I can't imagine how people must be feeling, especially this year, who are graduating, when things are so unknown. But I guess for me, hard work is what gets you to where you want to be. And I think perseverance and resilience are also two really important skills, because they are skills. You kind of have to train yourself to be resilient and to persevere and to have the patience that things will work out eventually, even if you sat there thinking, what am I going to do with my life? That's kind of where I was this time last year. I had one tutee, I didn't have a job. I just, everyone around me seemed to be in full-time careers, and they were buying houses, or they were getting married and having babies, and I was there a bit like, okay, twiddling my thumbs, what do I do? And it kind of fell into place for me, and perhaps I was very lucky, because I know that doesn't happen for everybody, but I did work hard, and I searched for jobs for a number of times. I worked at an agency for a year and a bit, just doing odd jobs, worked in a laboratory for some time, worked in a car company for some time. And so, you have to do those kind of odd bits to get to where you want to be. So I would say my best piece of advice is to believe in yourself and believe in your ability to persevere and to get to where you want to be, because if you truly want something, you will give it your all and you'll get there. It just might take a lot longer than you anticipated, or a lot shorter, like it did for me. I would also say that it's really important to have a good work-life balance and to put yourself first. And if you feel like you're getting overwhelmed and that things are getting too much and you're trying so much but you're not really getting anywhere, then you need to put your own mental health and your well-being first, for sure.
Massive thank you to Sophie for appearing on today's show. As always, if you can help spread the word of Graduate Compass, it would be a massive help. The point of this podcast is to kind of spread as much of the information as we gather from every interview in the show around. So if you do know anyone who you think would benefit from it, or anyone you think might be a good interviewee, put them in touch with the show, and or follow, like, share, all the rest of it. We're on TikTok, Facebook and Twitter, and you can subscribe to the podcast on anywhere you get your podcasts. In the meantime, I'm Cian Sullivan. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Graduate Compass. Remember, if there is a degree subject or specific industry you would like to be featured on any future episodes, then we would love to hear from you and know what you are trying to find out. Our email is info@graduatecompass.ie.